It is our pleasure to welcome you to this mini symposium on diversity and inclusion hosted by the IPPF South Asia Regional Office. This session will focus on an engaging Q&A session. Our moderator for today is Sylvester Merchant, also known as Sylvie, the Regional Community Engagement and Networks Lead at IPPF SARO. Sylvester is an LGBTQIA activist who is deeply involved with health and rights movement across South Asia.
My job title, when I applied, actually read disruptive partnerships. I clearly remember for the first time when I actually heard word SR and start have an understanding, basically, at least from the very Indian context, or even for that matter, South Asian people who will kind of cause UHI. This was more about MSM. Then came in transgender woman. That was the only here or get or even, and then all the rest of the other identities totally silent on. I think for decades I would even we do talk about inclusive SRHR, but in reality, how much have we actually progressed? I would actually like to now invite my speakers. Basically, may I request Anaya Rahimi, who is Pakistan's only transgender stand-up comedian who holds a bachelor in business administrative from Comsets, Lahore, and has a diverse background in business development, project coordination, and advocacy, with experience at Gateway Insurance Brokes in Dubai. I would now request Sode. Sode Raj. Rad is a non-binary eco-queer feminist Iranian gender equality activist. They have merged the online and offline activities individually, but also in Spectrum, the eco-queer feminist NGO they have founded 10 years ago. Welcome, my dear friend. The third on the list is Aritha. Aritha Vikram Singhe is the Equality Director at iPro Bono and General Counsel at TWC Investment Bank, with a background as an investment banking lawyer for Chance and KNL Gates in London. He has held roles including head of legal at Sri Lanka's Ministry of Finance and advisor to the government of financial, economic, and educational reforms. Appointed as a president advisor in 2023, Aritha supports Sri Lanka's IMF-backed economic and social reform agenda and advises the Ministry of Water and Estate Infrastructure Development, known for his advocacy for women, children, and LGBTQI rights. He was recognized as the #1 future business leader by the Financial Times in 2015 as a young role model by Sri Lankan Unites in 2020. Last but the least, our own very much Sonal Gyani. Sonal Gyani is a dynamic activist with over 15 years of experience advocating for LGBTQA rights in India and South Asia. Currently serving as a board member with UNAIDS program coordinating board and as an NGO delegate for the AIDS specific region, and holding the position for global senior advisor gender and inclusion at the International Planned Parenthood Federation. She offers valuable technical assistance facilitating the implementation of inclusive strategies and empowerment approaches in the field of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Thank you, Sonal, for being a part of this panel. So, Anaya, with your work, especially with the trans communities in Pakistan. What are the key challenges which are faced by trans individuals in accessing SRHR services in Pakistan?
Mainly, the key challenges are compounded of social stigma and legal ambiguities, and also the healthcare provider biasness. What actually is happening right now is transgender people in Pakistan are not getting SRHR services as per their basic needs. There are a lot of organizations which are working for SRHR services, but mainly in HIV and STI sector, the transition surgeries. It's not happening in Pakistan. Trans community in Pakistan is not financially strong to get the proper surgeries. Healthcare providers are not well trained. They are related to the religious values, and it's very contradictory. These issues are considered as mental illness or un-Islamic. In Islam, it's another thing, the Shariat code. So due to that, they are also refused for the SRHR services mostly. Yeah.
Okay. When we say inclusive SRHR, what's your take on this?
Hello, everyone, again. I want to be short and disruptive. So inclusive SRHR work is everything that we saw this morning, not do that. We didn't see any disabled body on the screen. We didn't hear about the LGBT community that much. We were divided into men and women, girls and boys. The numbers that were shown to us were exactly what you shouldn't do when you're working on this. Myself and my friend, we decided to create Spectrum. Before that, we were activists, individual activists, and we were always considered as these disruptive individuals. We started this organization to be a disruptive organization. We have already had 7 projects, and we divided into different projects because we want to be inclusive. We use different languages for different audiences. Being inclusive and respecting the diversity is not about inviting somebody on the panel, but really sit with yourself and see who is really left behind. A white blonde woman picture in a Sri Lankan sex education leaflet is what makes people totally not resonate with sex education and say, well, this is not our culture. As soon as I hear we have to be sensitive to culture, I'm like, culture has always evolved because culture is made of human beings. And it's a very, very fine line between knowing the culture and starting to talk that language and fall into cultural relativism and just being stuck where we shouldn't be stuck.
How can legal and policy reforms in Sri Lanka better address the intersectional challenge faced by LGBT individuals, particularly with respect to access to reproductive and sexual in this country?
Thank you, Sylvester. Decrim is still not finished in Sri Lanka, right? So unlike our neighbor here, India, we haven't even come to the topic of discussing about discrimination in accessing healthcare and other services because we're still right at the bottom of criminalization. How do we give people perceived by the law as criminals and equitable access to healthcare services and other public services as any citizen? We have managed to push through certain policy initiatives and push for different interpretations of the law. We have put out challenges in court where a lesbian man or a gay man being prosecuted just because they have declared their sexual orientation to find evidence that they were homosexual, right? And these examinations are being conducted by health professionals. Discrimination against LGBT people is also the health sector, and that's a problem. Being a virgin is also now a criminal offense, as is being a lesbian as well. These are horrific crimes committed by the health sector against LGBT people. Through exposure of what was happening and creating a public outcry about it, we got first started with a directive from the Justice Ministry that these examinations need to stop. We got a circular issued from the police cannot participate in these kinds of examinations. And the Justice Ministry issued this circular in the Health Ministry guidelines policy. There is that persons cannot be discriminated based on their SOGI characteristics. We were also able to pass very recently a women's empowerment. Women cannot be discriminated based on, at least for women now, there is a certain right of protection through policy and legislation. Those are some of the victories they're a bit better protected.
You were part of the sex work assessment, which was done by South Asia Regional. Can you just tell us about what actually, what has come out of that, and very, very importantly, why at this juncture and why?
I think it started with the International Planned Parenthood Federation actually coming out with a policy on sex work. There were a lot of differing, conflicting, sometimes opposing opinions around sex work. We are clearly working with. The reason we had to kind of tilt towards sex workers and LGBTQI is a kind of pattern that you're noticing of a rampant criminalization that is spreading across the globe, puts them at the risk of death. Following the sex work policy, which was also very highly consultative process, I think it was so important for us to understand the context of our region, South Asia region. Following that, the approach of the policy, decided that let's work on doing an assessment of the South Asia region. And how we did it was very similar to the policy process, whole research. And they actually a fantastic organization called Ashodhya Samiti, which has trained sex workers to do research. In terms of what are the findings that came out, to kind of keep it brief, of course, in terms of the legal situation, there are different levels of criminalization in different parts of the South Asia region. The sexual reproductive health and rights space is around HIV. The assessment clearly, points out that it's not HIV, it's stigma and discrimination, and it's violence. There were certain factors which were very common across regions, but there were certain which were very unique to particular countries. Raids happen, and then you are actually, as a sex worker, you are at sort of risk. In terms of really finding a legal provider who will support you through that thing will be different. The problem is not the sex work as an identity, it's really the stigma which is causing most of the problem.
And I can surely draw so much of parallels with the situation before decriminalization, when 377 was still there in India, and especially with trans communities, Hijra communities.
Actually, if I may, I wanted to add that one point, that somehow sex worker, the conversations that are happening in spaces outside of sex worker community-based conversations, they are very much in silos, as though a sex worker is a singular identity. But actually, a sex worker can be a trans person, a sex worker can be a married woman, she could be a pregnant sex worker, she could be a trans sex worker. So there are so many elements. You want to look at it intersectionally, which across is missing.
Since now we've started talking about policy, I remember the Trans Person Protection of Right 2000, especially Pakistan. Does it help, or does it even help you as trans?
The answer is no, but I will explain a little bit about the Trans Protection Right Act 2018. We started this journey in 2011 when Almas Bobby, a very huge name from Pakistan, old school senior activists, she started protest against the rights and the violence and the harassment. It happened since 2011. We all were boys before the transition, not boys, I should say. I belong to the first educated group, collectively started working on the law. We went to the ground, do the questionnaires, the research. What do you want? What is the actual need? What should we do? What should we write in the law? And then we contacted who were ready to support us. They were like, no, this will happen. And everything actually happened. The Shariat law, the Islamic law, they started opposing this since the beginning. Even we were shocked. We filed the petition and we filed this act in the parliament. We celebrated it. The doctors, the moment they find out that I'm trans, they're like, are you sexually active? I had a sore throat, and he connected it with a STI. So the condition was so bad, and then the doctor actually told my father, we need to check her if she's a real intersex or not. We also use the intersex terminology in the law. Politicians and the Shariat mullahs were considering it as intersex. The law says we will not be discriminated in the public spaces. We will get the equal healthcare opportunities, equal employment opportunities, equal educational opportunities. They didn't define the protocols. The implementation is so weak. When we go for our CNIC, we tell them that we're trans, we have the self-identity X. They're like, which law says that? show us the law. I handle violence cases in Punjab, Lahore, and all the cities and villages around. These guys are culprits. I have to show them the law. Rape is very difficult to register. We're still trying to pressurize the government, do the protests, talk about it more through social media. We were standing at the same place before the law. It's just a paper which has been passed and it's there in our constitution.
So, and very new ways of working, especially Spectrum. In that context, what strategies can ensure the security of personal data, which is collected through digital platforms, while building trust with marginalized groups to address concerns about surveillance and privacy? How do you navigate?
It's very difficult, but possible. It's not only lesbian and gay and trans people, it's a bigger community. Maybe we should also not give access to condoms or something like that, or anything else really ridiculous. Child marriage in Iran is very legal. Abortion is very, very illegal. Access to contraceptives is almost illegal now. We cannot systematically create and reinforce the violence, gender and sexual-based violence. Listening to the government guidelines is sick. I am actually activating people inside the country. As diaspora-based organization, like any other organization, the idea of diaspora activism is not new to the Iranians. We started to use internet to really become the activists. So when it comes to privacy and collecting data, we don't collect data. We started with land, and we started with occupying macho land. We don't want to occupy anything anymore. We just want to eradicate it from the world. There were a lot of literally sexual questions, because the word bisexual comes with sex in it. So we created a platform for sex education, but for everyone. I want to address the person who hates me the most inside Iran. I want to talk to that person who doesn't have internet, who doesn't know me, who always I had a sight card, who already could hate me because of my shaved hair or anything. It was a period tracker, and that was really the hard part. I started to understand how much gender-based violence it is actually in the application creation, and how our bodies, female-assigned bodies, are actually a source of income. We also integrated the whole legal frame of the Iranian family law, and how we could circumvent it, like how to get more legally, get more rights, not still equal. This is part of identity. We don't want to emphasize on binary of gender. We definitely have to update. I mean, it might be triggering, but official documents call the LGBTQ people faggot. People are using it, or we are improving. So it's a work of everyday work of understanding the socius-based knowledge, as every one of us does, and then trying to understand how am I going to transfer this to a community where they do not have access to this information.
Thank you. Navigating one opposition to the another, and this is a question for you. How have anti-gendered movements in Sri Lanka and South Asia impacted your advocacy work for LGBTQI rights and access to
this anti-gender movement it's not a South Asian thing. It is causing a lot of harm. We're seeing a lot of this anti-gender narrative. Or the concept of gender is a new invention, which it isn't. Trans persons and LGBT people have existed throughout history. Most Hindu gods have different gendered versions of themselves. Anti-gender narrative is actually giving us a lot of headaches. There's nonsense coming from the West now, and damage has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And we saw this determination to the Gender Equality Bill. Gender Equality Bill was a very, very progressive piece of legislation. The purpose of the bill was to ensure that there was non-discrimination for persons, and non-discrimination in the avenues of accessing healthcare, right to education, privacy. It was not like it was wanting anything sort of out of the ordinary, right? Access to be able to access healthcare. You should have certain rights and protections. In Sri Lanka, we have pre-enactment judicial review. When a bill is presented to Parliament, people can challenge that bill on their constitutionality. And this bill got challenged at the Supreme Court. Now, traditionally, the court, when such challenges have happened, the court has always allowed for interested parties to intervene. Those are called intervening petitioners. The court blocked intervening petitioners. But then it's a great violation of natural justice when the only party you're now allowing to hear is the party who is opposed to the bill and not the parties who are in favor of the bill, that determination. I wanted to vomit because it was not based in law. Recognizing a right to equality based on sex or gender would be violating the rights of religion and culture. So one of the concepts of this legislation was to have what's called a gender focal point, which would be an official who will be responsible to ensure there is no gender-based discrimination, for sexual harassment, to regulate private companies by requiring a concept of gender focal point would be violating the legislative power of the people and therefore requires a referendum. It was the most garbage of determinations I have ever read, and that is a direct result of the anti-gender. A year before, the Supreme Court gave a very beautiful determination, recognizing the right to equality, recognizing the fundamental rights of LGBT persons, the need to have the penal code repealed or amended in order to achieve these rights. Judge said, we will never allow for this law to be repealed. We have to be more vigilant about it as a South Asian society. I feel its primary target, the LGBT community is probably just collateral damage of it. The primary target is cisgendered women.
Actually, so true, because, I want this to be shifted into that hall in the morning.
So to
please.
disrupt,
Please.
with all due respect to you and the Western countries, no, Iran has created anti-gender thing. The Western countries, they're very well organized, but they're very much friends with country delegates like the Islamic Republic of Iran. They're learning from each other. Please give the credit to Iranian government. Thank you.
And it's not even just external anymore. It's inside our community also now.
What steps can be taken to improve access to integrated SRHR and HIV services specifically for sex workers? So any specific learnings from the assessment or your own observations? So
I think one of the most primary observations is that the interventions that have worked the best are community-led. People who have no clue of our lived lives, lived reality, are making judgments for us. They think that we are incapacitated to make decisions for ourselves. A lot of the government ministry, they keep conflating trafficking with sex work. They remove the agency out of it, multiple things. Sorting those problems out I find that community-based organizations have really sort of championed it. It's so important that, we know our rights. Many people don't even know it. So then them recognizing that it is the community which has to be trained to kind of negotiate with this, with these kind of bureaucratic procedures or, ways to red tape the whole thing. We have Shale over here also. They have a legal aid support unit as communities to, be able to sort of understand this. And I find that also these sex worker networks, all of them have actually pushed for great, policy level support. In the HIV movement, what tends to happen, it's only around HIV. So most community-based organizations not turning somebody away who has a gender-based violence issue. You will find most community-based organizations try to address every situation, whether it's a situation of violence, it's a situation of anything. I think the another thing that's sort of changing is with the, sex worker networks, it's shifted a little bit to digital. They are operating on WhatsApp networks and things like that. It has actually really been communities who've been able to, sort of work through these nitty-gritties and ensure, kind of support.